Hello, welcome to my channel, Edible Thoughts Makes. Today I have a featured finished project video for you. The way I do these videos is I go through a pattern rundown, all the specifications that are listed prior to purchasing the pattern if it is a paid for pattern, and then I go into my modifications and my yarn choice, my color choices, things like that. And then at the end, I go through some outfits that I plan on wearing it or just to try out. And oftentimes I'm recording these videos just very shortly after I've finished the project. So the outfits that you are seeing are probably like the first time I'm trying it all together. So you kind of get my first take, my impression of how I think the things go together, or maybe not. I try to keep these videos about 30 minutes or less, but a lot of times it'll just depend on maybe how many modifications that I made. And this one I did make several modifications, so we'll kind of see how this goes. I will not be teaching you how to do any of the modifications. I'll just be sharing with you maybe why I did them and a little bit about maybe how I did it, but they aren't necessarily meant to be like a tutorial. I recommend if there are any techniques that you're unfamiliar with, go ahead and search it on Google or YouTube, or if you have a local yarn shop, you can ask them about the technique. Oftentimes yarn shops will host classes where they teach you about different methods of garment construction or different techniques and things like that. So I recommend going there. Also, if you have any specific questions about the pattern, I recommend going to the designer for pattern support. If you are new here, I always include closed captionings on my videos, so you can click on that CC button. Also, if I speak faster or slower than your preferences, YouTube allows you to adjust the speed. In the description box below this video, I include links to the projects that I talk about, to things that I share, as far as like designers, makers, things like that. I'll usually try to list to their website, and then you can find their socials and contact and all of that stuff there. Oftentimes I include visuals here on this screen, either to correct something that I've said that I catch in editing, or maybe it provides additional visual aid to whatever I am talking about. And so I just wanted to mention that in case you were doing something else and I don't want you to miss that information. I think that's everything I wanted to talk about there, so let's get to the pattern specifications. Okay, so today we are talking about the Harvest sweater by Jessie Maed Designs. It retails for $10 USD, and it was published in November of 2025. It is meant to be knit in a DK weight yarn, and the suggested yarn for the pattern is the Farmer's Daughter Fibers Pishkin DK. Gauge is 18 stitches by 28 rows and 4 inches of stranded color work and in stockinette stitch blocked. And the recommended needle sizes are a US 8 5mm needle and a US 7 4.5mm needle. Of course, use whatever needles will get you the gauge in the pattern. Yardages are provided, and the sizes available are XS to 5X to fit a chest measurement of 28 inches to 60 inches. The finished garment full chest measurement is 36 inches to 68 inches, and the design is meant to have a positive ease of 6 to 8 inches. So you base which size you pick based on that positive ease. Now, if you decide to do a different amount of ease, less or more, your fit may vary from what the designer intended. And so that's just something to keep in mind. Of course, you can pick whatever size you want, but just know that if the designer meant for it to fit a certain way, if you pick a different size for a different ease range, it may not fit the way you want it to, or it could fit exactly the way you want it to. The yarn recommended is a non-superwash yarn, which is generally the recommendation for color work because the fibers will tend to want to stick together a little bit better to make it less gapey and just create a smoother, more cohesive fabric. However, you could use superwash yarn if you want. Just know that your results, again, may not come out as intended if you go off script. There are yarn requirements given for each of the colors, and there are 4 colors recommended. You pick a main color and 3 contrast colors. I really do like it when patterns give you the yardages rather than the balls of yarn for whatever yarn they used. When a designer only gives me the balls of yarn or the hanks of yarn that they used for the yarn that they chose for their sample, that doesn't really give me a good approximation of the yardages that I need for any particular yarn. And I know that if I use a different yarn, the fiber content may vary, and so the yardage and the grams may vary. However, just giving me the hanks or balls of yarn that they used for their specific sample just isn't really that useful if I'm going to use a different yarn. When I'm given the yarn requirements for each of the different colorways, that just gives me a better way to figure out how much yarn that I need to purchase for whatever yarn I plan on using for my project. The techniques in this pattern are German short rows, 2 and 3 color stranded color work, catching floats, knitting in the round, increasing and decreasing. Now I will warn you, there are some pretty long floats, and though the designer says you don't really have to catch them unless they're X number of stitches long, I found that when I didn't catch my floats at that recommended stitch count, I found them getting too loose, and so I ended up catching my floats more often than the designer said in the pattern, just based on personal preference. And she does say that, just do whatever makes you comfortable, and I tried the longer float method and it was just too wiggly, and I tend to knit color work in garments very loose because I overcompensate and I don't want any puckering, and so my floats end up super loose. I stretch out all my stitches on my right hand needle when I'm knitting, which just makes it really elongated, and so I don't go up a needle size for color work, which is often recommended because people's color work tend to be tighter. And I think I did do that in the beginning when I was first learning color work because I didn't do all the things that stretches it out a little more. But then now that I do stretch all those things out, it just ends up being way too big if I go up a needle size. So for this sweater, I did not go up a needle size, and I did catch my floats more often than not. The sweater is knit seamlessly from the top down, and I think from there I did a lot of other things that are different. You might notice I have a button band. The original pattern does not have a button band because it's knit to be a pullover, and I converted mine into a steeked garment, and I cut that steek open and made it a cardigan. So this will be a good transition into my process and my modifications. All right, so when I first saw this pattern come out in November of 2025, I just love the striking graphic floral design. If you've been here for a while, you may know I just have a love for florals. And so I really wanted to make it, but I was thinking that all this color work section means there is basically double layers of fabric because it's stranded color work, and I was just a little concerned that it would be too hot. But I thought, okay, if I made this into a cardigan, I feel like that would be very wearable for me, and I would just get a lot more use out of it year round. So in order to do that, I had to make a few decisions before I started, just so I could get into that mindset of how I was going to shift things around and what I was potentially going to be doing after the fact instead of before. Maybe that doesn't quite make sense. Anyway, there were just a couple of things that I needed to figure out prior to starting because I would be starting different from how the pattern is started. So the pattern is knit top down. You cast on for the neckband ribbing, and then you knit a series of short rows to create this crescent shape in the back to raise the back because our bodies aren't shaped exactly the same in the front and back, so you just need a little more fabric in the back to raise that back neck so that your collar isn't choking you in the front. And that is all done prior to starting the color work section. I figured for my ease, I was just going to cast on with my main color in the number of stitches that I needed to start the color work chart. Then afterwards, I can pick up from that main color cast on and do what I need to do to get to the right number of stitches for the collar, which included some decreasing. And I didn't want to have that crescent shape right above the color work, and so I created my short row shaping in my neckband. And that just was a little more visually appealing to me, and I feel like the double stitches created in German short rows is way more hidden in ribbing than it is in stockinette fabric. And so that is what I did. I'm going to turn around real quick just to show you. So this back section is probably 1.5 inches in the center portion, and then it is a crescent shape because it ends up being maybe 1/2 inch or 3/4 inch in the front, which means I have more fabric covering the back neck area compared to the front, because if this back neck area was the same height in the front, then it would be sitting way higher on the front of my neck than the back of my neck. And I just really like how that shaping turned out. I feel like it looks very polished and tidy, and I don't have a big wedge between the collar and my color work section. I did all my finishings in an Italian sewn bind off because all the ribbing is a knit one, purl one, and I like how that looks. So that's what I did on the top. Now I did do that prior to cutting my steek open. So we're going to keep going now. I'm trying to figure out how to talk about this in like a timeline because I didn't do that neckband initially. I had to knit everything else first and go back and pick up the neckband, but that was before I did the button band. And so I'm just having a little bit of trouble trying to figure out how to best convey my process here in a way that's not super confusing or jumping all over the place. So moving on, sorry if this is a little bit confusing. Like I mentioned, I cast on with my main color in the number of stitches I needed to start the yoke. So then I followed the chart for the shorter option. There are 4 charts provided in the pattern. You have the longer, which was the original depth, and then you have a shorter one, and then you have one that has these echinacea daisy looking flowers on the bottom with the speckly dirt, and then other ones that have the speckly dirt without the flowers. I changed the last maybe 5 rounds because I didn't want my stem going into the dirt, which is how the original one looks, and I was kind of done doing 3 stranded color work by then, to be honest. So I just cut the green and then I continued in the dirt and just did 2 stranded color work to finish it off. Other than that, I think I just followed the chart as written and caught my floats more often. The yarn I chose for this pattern is Pearl Soho's Knitting Yarn DK. I love this yarn so much. This is applied 100% non-superwash merino yarn. It comes in 219 yards for 100 grams. It has a beautiful palette of lots of different heathered colorways, and I have used it in multiple garments at multiple gauges. I will say the more dense of a gauge you knit it at, the less likely you're going to get more pilling, and the looser gauges, you're probably going to end up with a more pillable garment. But even then, I don't feel like it is something where you like sneeze and it pills, which I have had that with other different fibers before and different yarns, but not for this one. I think I've knit it at anywhere from an 18 stitch to a 22 stitch gauge, and I've liked it at both. It is so drapey. It feels so nice in hand when I'm knitting with it, and I really enjoy wearing it. I don't find it itchy at all. Again, it is 100% non-superwash merino, so you get the softness of the merino, but being non-superwash, it still has a slight toothiness to it, but very, very slight. Of course, if you have very sensitive skin, you may have different opinions on it. It's just an opinion. It's very subjective. I really like it, and I have knit multiple garments with it, and I still have other garments on the needles using this yarn. I did purchase this yarn, and the colors that I used are Acorn Brown, which is this beautiful warm heathered brown, and for the center of the flowers and for the echinacea petals, I used Cat Paw Pink, which is a beautiful light peachy pink. That color is a discontinued colorway that I purchased during a sample discontinued color sale. And then we have Red Geranium, which is an orangey red. I love how that pops. And then for the stem, I use Sour Citron, which is a beautiful heathered yellow-green color that is left over from a cardigan that I knit previously. I mentioned the yarn, I mentioned the color work, I mentioned the neckband. Okay, I feel bad that this is so jumbled, but that's what happens when you make a lot of modifications to a pattern as you go, and you might jump around a little bit. And so I forgot to mention that when I cast on, I also had to add 5 stitches for the center, and that was going to create this panel down the front that I would then cut up the center stitch later. So there was a panel in the front, and maybe if I have a picture, I'll insert it here on the screen just so you have a better visual. I continued that panel through the colorwork section. You just don't count it into your colorwork pattern repeat. And then when I got to the main color in the body section, then I just continued that panel all the way down, and I would put a light bulb stitch marker in the center if I needed to track it. Otherwise, I had 2 stitch markers on either end of that steek panel, and you can just basically ignore it. and just knit over those 5 stitches going in the round because they don't count as part of your patterning in the whole garment. It is just meant to be a panel to cut later. Okay, anything else crucial that I'm forgetting here? I think I can move on to the next modification. The body in the pattern has, I think, this slight cable detail maybe in the split hem. I didn't pay a ton of attention to it because I knew I wasn't going to be doing it. And instead, I did some short row shaping in the back part of my garment. Maybe if I go to the side, you'll see it a little bit better. It just dips maybe an inch or so in the back. And I was doing that because I didn't want it to tent out. I feel like sometimes with garments that lean on more positive ease, sometimes the back section can tent out a little bit. And if I add slightly more fabric to create that high-low hem, I feel like it just sits a little better in the back. Also, because I omitted that big wedge of short row shaping prior to the color work section, I felt like just giving a little more fabric in that back area would prevent it from sitting funny on my body. And so that worked. And the way I do that is I go about 2/3 around in the back. So 1/3 one direction, 1/3 the other direction, put the middle of the round in the center back. And then I just kind of work back and forth to create a crescent in the back. There are lots of tutorials out there for that. I would look up how to create high-low hems or add short row shaping to the bottom of a sweater. After I did that, I did my 1x1 hem and bound off with an Italian sewn bind off. And then I think after that I was ready to do my button bands because I didn't want to knit my sleeves next without knowing how the garment was going to fit. And so I first did a crocheted reinforcement, which basically pulls the 2 legs of the center stitch open, which makes it easier to cut down on the bar of that stitch all the way up your garment. So I did use, I think, a fingering weight yarn to do that. And I can show you here. And if it doesn't show up very well, I'll just insert a photo. But it's this red heathered yarn here. I did a single crochet all the way up that part. And then so that would make it go open a little bit. I think I shared that in the previous episode, maybe episode 152. So if you are unclear about that, maybe go to that episode if you missed it. And then after that, I did pick up and knit my button bands prior to cutting it open because the fabric is just more stable at that point versus cutting it open and then picking up for my button band. So that's what I did. So I knit a knit 1, purl 1 button band. My buttonholes, I did I think it's a 3-stitch 1 row button band, or maybe 4-stitch. I can't remember exactly, but you create the button band all in one go and then you just keep knitting the ribbing. If I remember what it's called, I will put it on the screen. I think it's called a 3-stitch 1 row button band. It's a 3-stitch buttonhole worked over 1 row. Maybe there's a more succinct way to say that, but if you search for that, maybe you'll find it. So that's what I did, and I knew I wanted to use buttons that were about 1 inch in diameter. So I thought a 3-stitch would work. I think I might have tried a 2-stitch initially, but that looked like it was going to be way too small. And so I did a 3-stitch and went with that. I did 5 buttonholes, so I just spaced them out evenly, and then away I went. So I did 2 lines of button bands, and by then I had already knit my neckband and picked up and knit that so that my button band could go all the way to the edge of my neckband. If you wanted to knit your neckband on top of your button band and not have that button at the very top, you could do that too and just knit the button band first and then pick up, including the top of your button band, to knit that collar. Your collar would just be more open because you wouldn't be able to do a button on the very top unless you created a buttonhole within your collar. So that is not what I did. I knit my collar first and then I knit my button band. So my button band goes all the way to the top of my collar. After I did all that, I went to my sewing machine and I did a straight stitch for an extra reinforcement. And I'm not sure if you'll be able to see it or not, but I just picked a row of stitches to do it on. I'm not sure it's going to be visible. I did not use a matching thread, but I also did not use like a super bright colored one. Maybe I did use a matching thread. It's brown. I'm not sure if it's going to show up, but there is a straight stitch running along one stitch here. And that just creates an extra reinforcement without adding to any bulk. And then I think after I did that straight stitch, then I cut it open. And that was fine. Nothing fell apart. And this garment has been fully wet blocked. And again, nothing fell apart. So we're just fine. And then after I cut it open, then I picked up and knit my sleeves, US 8 5mm needles. And I did not do the same decrease shaping or tapered sleeves in the pattern. I think I knit 50 rounds without decreasing at all, which got me to about my elbow. And then I decreased on the first of, I think, every 10 rounds until I got to my wrist. And then I switched to my ribbing needles and I knit maybe 1.5 inches or so before doing the Italian sewn bind off. And so my sleeves go to my palms, which I like because over time I find that sleeves tend to like to ride up and shrink a little bit. And I do not like my sleeves that are supposed to be full length to be too short. So this works out pretty well. And as a cardigan, it's always going to be layered over something. So I'm just really glad that I have that extra roominess there. All right, we are on to the styling portion of this episode. So as somebody who picks items to make based on how they're going to fit into my lifestyle, or maybe they're a gift for somebody, so they are made with intention, I like to include this section or this segment into these feature to finish project videos because I feel like it's helpful to see how a garment may be worn in different ways, and it's a fun way to play with the things that you might have or envision what you might create with the garment that you've made. Right now, I have this cardigan worn with my slightly sassy V. This is a 3/4 length tee designed by Amy Scher, and I tested this for Amy several years ago. I'll have the information here on the screen because I have it vertically, which means I have 2 black portions on the screen to include text. So I will have text on the screen that will give you the information of what I am wearing the cardigan with. So I have this fingering weight tee underneath and it is very comfortable. I could wear this in the springtime for sure, or in the fall when it definitely gets a little chillier. And I have it paired with some wide leg, high-waisted corduroy pants. I feel like this warm tone color story going on here is just very cozy and comfortable and relaxed, and I really like it. So I'm going to change into my next outfit. These next 2 are all items that I have sewn, and I'm excited to see how they will go. All right, the top is a sleeveless crew neck, cropped sewn top with bust darts. It is the Ashton top by Helen's Closet, Canadian company that I just love. I love how their patterns are written. I like how techniques are explained, and I think they are very size inclusive and have a lot of options within one pattern. So I made lots and lots of Ashton tops last summer, and I paired it with this beautiful skirt that I self-drafted. There are inseam pockets, and they are lined with a brown linen, and I made it a tiered skirt, and I used up almost the entire amount of fabric that I purchased. This is Fabulism. I bought it from Lakes Makery, and that is a fabric shop in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I love this olivey green fabric with the geometric daisies on it. And I feel like this color story is also really fun. I could definitely see myself wearing this in the spring In the morning, oftentimes it's still really chilly, so having this woolly cardigan over this cotton skirt tank top set, I feel like it just, it's so fun. And I like the colors going on here. I feel like the chartreuse in the stems really go with the olive color, and overall the color story just looks very earthy and fun, and the petals really stand out being the only red orange color in this ensemble. So yeah, I really like it. Next up, we have this brushed cotton flannel herringbone dress that I sewed up, I think a couple of years ago. And it is so snuggly and soft. And I believe I purchased this fabric from Joann's, which is no longer. I think the sleeveless bodice of this pattern is from the Metamorphic dress by So Liberated. I believe that is what it is from. And then I just did my own thing for the gathered skirt. I used the fabric that I had and sewed in the gathers to the bodice. This cotton flannel dress, I actually sewed 2 of them. I like to wear this dress with either a thin merino long sleeve underneath and then a sweater over top, or a more billowy sleeve shirt underneath and then a sweater over top or a vest over top. I feel like it is very nice and cozy, worn with leggings or wool tights and boots. So this dress I definitely made intended for colder weather, and I really like how it looks with this cardigan. The nice thing about a cardigan with skirts or dresses that are meant to be higher waisted, or in this case it's a dress and it's not high waisted, but where the gathers start is higher. And if I want to button up my cardigan, I just don't have to button it all the way down to the bottom where it might pull funny on my skirt. So I can just leave the bottom part open, and that'll just flow more nicely with the A-line shape of a gathered skirt. Versus a sweater, it would have to be closed, and then it might pull funny where it goes past my hips. But on a cardigan, it doesn't have to be closed all the way, so it can be more open and doesn't have to cinch in at all at the waist portion or where the gathering starts on the skirt. So yeah, I think I really like this. I don't know if I would wear it more open or closed. It's very comfortable. It's very cozy. This is also something that I think could be worn very easily in the spring, in the winter, in the fall, and I really like it. I think I'm going to pull one more me-made sewn item out to try with this cardigan, and then we'll be done. This is a linen Lawrence dress patterned by Helen's Closet. And I kind of did my own thing for the tiers as far as amount of fabric goes. This one is definitely a maxi length. It goes all the way down to my ankles. I have inseam pockets, and I just love this olivey green linen. It is a sleeveless dress with a V-neck, and I think it looks really nice with this cardigan. I actually made several dresses of this pattern in different lengths and different colors, so I think this cardigan could go with my long yellow one as well, but I just pulled this green maxi length one to try with this cardigan, and I think I really like this combination. I feel like this is one that might go well when we are transitioning between spring and summer. Like in the height of summer, I will not be pulling out this woolly DK weight stranded color work cardigan. I just don't feel like it's something I would be wearing for very long. However, perhaps it would be good in air conditioning or like really early mornings or evenings where it is a little bit chillier, but with the humidity in the summer, I just don't generally gravitate towards wool. So being realistic, 3 months out of the year, I probably will not reach for this cardigan. However, that means sweater weather for the other 9 months of the year, and I feel like I could definitely wear these two together. I think that concludes my little parade of me-made items that I think would be really fun to pair with this cardigan. Of course, it would also just go well with jeans and a t-shirt. I think the amount of color and the graphic floral just really brightens my mood and is so much fun to wear. And there are so many different color combinations you can do with this color work, and I love seeing what people are coming up with. I'm so glad that I decided to convert it into a steeked cardigan. I really enjoy knitting color work, and I feel like I just got that fun of the color work in the top part, and then my brain was just having to figure out how to do the rest since I went definitely off script. But I'm so happy with the result, and I hope that this video helped maybe inspire some ideas on how you might really make a pattern your own. This one I definitely deviated more than maybe some of the other patterns. I mean, I cut the garment open. So I'm not sure if I so much helped demystify anything, because I don't think there was really anything to demystify per se for the original pattern, because it is a top-down pullover with a color work yoke. That being said, I also hope I didn't super confuse you or send you on this very confusing journey of deciphering what I did to my garment. Again, if you have any questions about techniques, I recommend just searching keywords for figuring out how to do those things. This is not meant to be a tutorial. I just wanted to share with you the things that I did to make this garment my own. With that, cheers to being creative, and I will talk to you next time. Bye!